So, Barb, when we first met, you and your co-author were just in the midst of finishing a book. And
Sorry about that.
Actually, she skipped a bunch of workshops she was supposed to be at.
It was,
but she had a really good excuse. What were you doing?
Well, Catherine Bowers and I conceived of this idea to write a book about the overlap between the diseases of humans and animals. And we really decided to...
This is Zoobiquity.
Which became Zoobiquity. Actually, in the beginning, we realized that there was such an overlap between the diseases of animals and humans. I mean, breast cancer, heart failure, diabetes, and even mental illnesses like compulsive disorders and some eating disorders and self-injury. I mean, as the more we explored, we realized there was so much of an overlap. But where we saw an opportunity was that so few physicians were aware of this. The veterinarians are aware, but the physicians weren't, and so few patients, people who have these diseases, were so underaware of how the commonality, this commonality in the vulnerability to disease. And so we decided to write this book. And what happens when you start thinking about, let's say, heart failure in a bird and heart failure in a human, if it's the same kind of heart failure, the next place you go is to common ancestry. And you ask, well, if this bird is vulnerable to this form of heart failure, and if human beings are vulnerable to this form of heart failure, was the common ancestor between humans and avian species also vulnerable? And as you begin to do that over and over, as you find out about a variety of diseases, human, quote-unquote, human diseases in non-human animals, you start to create a phylogeny. That is a tree that looks at the relationship between species, but a phylogeny that is looking at the vulnerability to disease.
So this is a fundamentally new idea, as far as I can tell. Lots of people do phylogenies about traits, but this whole idea of asking why are traits vulnerable to disease, and in particular a phylogeny of vulnerability to disease, is something you've pioneered.
Well, it was one of these ideas that was really hiding in plain sight. I mean, as if you're going to think in a deep way about comparative medicine, you have to start thinking from an evolutionary perspective. And that's what happened. Catherine and I started arriving at that, and we then thought, well, was anyone looking at evolutionary medicine? And this was probably back in 2009 or so. And I had actually read your book, but we sent you an email and we asked you, I don't even know if you remember this.
Well,
you probably
hope I answered.
You not only did you answer, you said, let's talk. And you set aside a couple of hours one afternoon, and I drove over to Catherine's house, and we sat at her dining room table, and we called you, and we had a long list of questions for you about evolutionary medicine, which you must do this a lot. I mean, seriously.
I'll do it more now that
You did. Anyway, at the end of that conversation, you, I think, mentioned the Mount Desert Isle course, this kind of summit of evolutionary medicine that you were going to be having in Maine. And we were two California girls, we're two LA people, but we thought,
let's go to the North Pole.
We saw where it was on the map. Anyway, we decided that we would go, and we were excited to attend all the lectures, but we then realized that we had a book deadline that we needed to get a draft in. So we came to as much as we could. We heard some wonderful lectures. We met some very important people in terms of my thinking.
Steve Stearns was there, and Peter Ellison was there.
Steve Stearns was there, Peter Ellison was there, Peter Gluckman was there, Andrew Reed was there, Athena Actipis. So it really was a place for, I'm a physician, I'm a clinician who's starting to get interested in this connection, and because of this summit, it really gave me a kind of immersive exposure to the way people were thinking and their scholarship. So that was a really pivotal moment for me.
So I'm going to say, she also went home then and started talking with the chair of biology at UCLA, and they created a program in evolutionary medicine. Why don't you give just a little ad for your program, and then we'll go on to the next topic.
Well, really, it's true. As the more I got interested in the intersection of medicine and evolutionary biology and learned about this emerging field of evolutionary medicine, it occurred to me that there were ways to engage this field that hadn't been done before. And I had many years I've been faculty at UCLA. I've done a lot of teaching for our medical students and our residents and fellows. So I was sort of in a position to to do something. And so Dan Blumstein, who was then the chair of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, he and I got together, and he is someone who had been long thinking about the applications of his work in evolutionary biology to human medicine. And we decided, well, let's do this. And so we created an evolutionary medicine program. And the first iteration of this program was Evolutionary Medicine Month. And we essentially said, okay, February is Darwin's birth month. And we are going to celebrate by bringing together the North Campus, so that's the folks in evolutionary biology, and the South Campus, the physicians, the clinicians, the folks at the medical school together. And we're going to have our grand rounds in the month of February be about evolution and medicine. And so we were lucky, we sourced funding, and for the last 5 years we have invited world-class evolutionary biologists from around the world to give an address to our medical students, our interns, our residents, our fellows, our senior faculty.
I bet everybody loves it.
It's been very popular, and one of the most fun parts about it is that afterwards we actually have our evolutionary biologists and we embed them on rounds with our clinical teams. So we're essentially saying, through our actions, through Evolutionary Medicine Month, that evolutionary biology is as foundational to medicine as mathematics is to engineering or architecture. And we are we are trying to manifest that through exposure and through scholarship and through learning. So that's the beginning of Evolutionary Medicine Program.
So I'm going to come back and do a whole separate segment about your book, because want people to know about that in particular. But I should say, for those watching, her suggestion about having evolutionary biologists join physicians on rounds, just do it. Everybody will have a wonderful time. Wonderful idea.